Welcome to another episode of the AI-driven Swebbcast. The source content is all Swebb, but the interpretation and presentation is all AI. Swebb is a productive disruptor for leaders and teams in churches and marketplace organizations. His goal is to make you better first, make you a friend later. Swebb serves leaders and executive teams around the world, primarily focused on helping organizations maximize what they say they want to do. He drives you to execute on your expectations, even if it hurts your ego. He's not here to please everyone, nor does he seek validation. But if you're serious about elevating your leadership and team performance, you'll know where to find him. Connect with Swebb at swebb.fyi or on Instagram at swebbfyi.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're going to be diving into a coaching call.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's Swebb, the church consultant guy. And he's talking with a potential client.
Okay.
Who's thinking about getting into the church consulting world himself.
Interesting.
And it gives us a really interesting look at how Swebb built his business and, what his take on the whole church world is.
Yeah, this should be good.
I think so.
Well, one thing that jumped out at me right away was this potential client.
Yeah.
He's got a background in corporate operations.
Oh, wow.
Not like the typical church role.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and Swebb even points out that this could actually be like a huge advantage.
Like he's coming at it from a totally different angle.
Totally. It's like Swebb saying, forget everything you think you know about how churches work. They don't think like businesses, and someone with your skills could be a real asset.
It's like he's bringing a fresh perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Swebb really emphasizes how churches often lack like those clear operational structures.
Right.
And that strategic thinking that businesses rely on.
It's just a different world.
So totally different. He even goes so far as to say that pastors are notoriously horrible at the business side of things.
Wow. He doesn't hold back, does he?
No, he doesn't. Why do you think he's so blunt about it?
I think, honestly, I think it's a deliberate choice.
Okay.
Like he's trying to kind of shake up this potential client's preconceived notions about what the church world is really like.
Oh, like a reality check.
Exactly. It's like, this is the landscape. Are you sure you want to play here?
And for someone coming from a business background, that kind of bluntness might actually be totally, it cuts through all that vague, vision and mission language that churches can sometimes get stuck in.
He's not wrong, though, is he? I mean, think about it. How many churches do you know that actually have, like, clearly defined goals, metrics for success? Decision-making processes.
Not many, I'd say.
Not many at all.
And that's exactly where Swebb sees the opportunity, right?
It's a gap.
It's a gap that someone with business expertise
can totally fill.
Yeah, can come in and just revolutionize things.
It makes you think about, like, other fields, too.
Right.
Where that kind of expertise would be valuable.
Like, are there any blind spots in your field where your skills would be, like, super valuable?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'm sure our listeners can think of a few.
Yeah, I'm sure they can.
An industry or organization that could use a little more structure, a little more strategic thinking.
Exactly. It's about spotting those areas where you can make a real difference.
I like that.
Now, going back to Swebb,
yeah,
it's fascinating how this whole, like, lack of structure thing really shapes how he approaches his consulting.
Yeah, he talks about these two different services he offers.
Yeah.
Drifter consulting, he calls it. Yeah, where he kind of drops in, shares some knowledge, and then moves on.
Okay.
And then there's the deeper coaching where he's like more involved in the client's journey.
Interesting. So like two different levels of engagement.
Exactly.
I like that.
That drifter style, though, that's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it's like almost the opposite of how a lot of consultants operate.
Totally. No long-term contracts, no trying to create like dependency.
Right. It's all about delivering that immediate tangible value and then empowering the client to actually take the reins.
What do you think are the pros and cons of that approach?
Let me think.
Especially for someone like this potential client.
Well, on the one hand, you get that focused expert input without feeling locked into anything long term.
Right.
But on the other hand, it might mean more work on the client's end.
Right. To actually implement the changes.
Yeah, to implement the changes without that ongoing support.
It's a trade-off.
Definitely a trade-off. What are your thoughts?
I think it depends a lot on the client's personality.
Okay.
Like how comfortable they are with taking ownership of the process.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Some people might thrive with that, like sink or swim approach.
Right.
While others might need a little more hand-holding.
Absolutely.
It's important to, know yourself.
Yeah.
What kind of support you need.
Couldn't agree more.
Now, another thing that's really interesting about Swebb is how he approaches pricing.
Oh, yeah. He's got some pretty unconventional ideas about that.
Totally unconventional. No long-term contracts.
Right.
No fixed annual fees.
He's like the anti-consultant.
He really is. He charges based on the client's needs.
Okay.
And he's even happy to do free initial calls.
Wow.
Just to make sure it's a good fit.
That's pretty radical.
It is. Most consultants are trying to, like, lock you into these big, long engagements.
Yeah.
But Swebb is basically saying, I'm so confident in what I can deliver that I don't need to tie you down.
It takes a lot of confidence to operate that way.
It really does.
It also says a lot about his values, you know?
What do you mean?
He's not just in it for the money.
Oh, I see what you mean.
He genuinely wants to work with people who align with his vision.
Yeah.
People who are ready to put in the work.
He even compares it to how he runs his Instagram. Right?
He's not trying to please everyone there either.
And it works for him.
And he points out that some of the most successful churches are the ones that are willing to take a stand.
Oh, yeah. Even if it ruffles some feathers.
Exactly. So he's not just talking the talk.
He's walking the walk.
Yeah, he's living his principles.
It's like a case study in personal branding, you know?
Totally. Makes you think, what would happen if we applied that same focus and authenticity to our own work?
What would our no list look like?
That's a good question.
We'll have to think about that one.
Yeah, we'll have to unpack that a bit more.
But before we get too deep into that,
okay,
let's hear more about how Swebb actually puts these ideas into practice.
Agreed. Let's dive into that in the next part of our deep dive. Welcome back to part 2 of our deep dive into Swebb's coaching call.
So in that last part, we were talking about how Swebb encourages that potential client to define like his ideal client.
Right.
But also to create a no list.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
Those types of clients he absolutely does not want to work with.
Smart strategy.
It's something we can all apply, you know, in our own work.
Absolutely.
Whether we're consultants, freelancers, even just thinking about who we collaborate with on projects.
It's all about being intentional, right?
Totally.
Swebb's not afraid to say no. Yeah. And that actually, I think, increases his value.
Why do you think that?
Because it shows he's not just chasing after every dollar, you know?
Right. He's selective.
He's got standards.
Okay, so let's get into some of Swebb's specific criteria.
Yeah, let's hear it.
He mentions that he needs to work with decision makers.
Okay.
People who can actually implement the changes.
Yeah.
Like, he gives this example of a youth pastor reaching out to him.
Oh, interesting.
It's like, look, I love your enthusiasm, but you probably can't afford me.
Right.
And your senior pastor's probably not going to sign off on this.
Yeah, that makes sense.
For those of you who don't know church structures,
right,
the senior pastor is like the ultimate decision maker.
The big boss.
Exactly.
So Swebb's basically saying,
go straight to the top.
Yeah, don't waste your time with the middlemen.
He's so blunt about it.
I know, but it's kind of refreshing, isn't it?
Totally. No beating around the bush.
Just straight to the point.
Makes you think about how often we get stuck in situations where decisions get bogged down.
Because you're not talking to the right person.
Exactly. The person with the power to say yes.
It's so frustrating.
Super frustrating.
So Swebb's advice there, gold.
Pure gold.
Identify those decision makers and focus your energy there.
And he's also really realistic about the limitations of smaller organizations.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
He knows they often have limited resources.
Right.
And he's not interested in taking on clients who aren't really set up for success.
He's doing them a favor.
Absolutely. By being honest about that.
It's not just about finding a decision maker.
Yeah.
It's about finding the right decision maker.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He even mentions like church size matters to him.
Oh, really?
To an extent.
Okay.
He suggests like 500 people as a benchmark.
A benchmark for what?
For churches that can afford his services, basically.
Gotcha.
And actually benefit from what he brings to the table.
Makes sense.
But he's also quick to point out that it's not just about the numbers.
Oh.
It's about mindset.
Mindset.
Yeah, like, is the organization actually ready to grow?
I see.
Do they have a clear vision?
That's a good point.
Are they willing to put in the work?
He actually uses this analogy of a church that's stuck at like 100 people for a year.
Oh, interesting.
Basically saying, if you haven't grown by then, maybe it's time to like reassess, take a step back.
Yeah, it might sound harsh, but he's pushing people to be honest with themselves.
Right.
About their goals and their potential.
I like that.
And that's good advice no matter what field you're in, right?
Totally. Makes you think, am I chasing a goal that's no longer serving me?
Ooh, that's deep.
Am I pouring energy into something that's not yielding results?
Maybe it's time for a change.
Exactly. Maybe it's time for a pivot.
I like that.
Now, another thing that really stood out to me about Swebb is his emphasis on personal connection.
Oh, yeah. He talks about that.
He actually says that he needs to genuinely like the people he works with.
I remember that.
What do you make of that?
Is it too idealistic?
I don't know. I actually think it's pretty smart.
Really? Why?
Well, think about it. The best collaborations you've been a part of,
yeah,
didn't they usually involve people you actually enjoyed working with?
That's true.
When you have that rapport, that shared energy, it elevates everything.
It's like that saying, if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Right. And if you work with people you enjoy,
it definitely makes the work more enjoyable.
Exactly. And it seems like Swebb uses that initial free call to assess this, too.
That initial free call?
Yeah, to see if there's that personal connection.
It's like a vibe check.
Totally. He's not just giving away free advice.
Right.
He's using it to determine if the client is a good fit.
A good fit personality-wise.
Exactly.
It's a two-way street, though, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's a chance for the potential client to get a feel for Swebb, too.
Absolutely. Think about it.
Yeah.
If you were hiring a coach or a consultant, wouldn't you want to make sure you could stand being in a room with them for hours on end?
Good point.
You got to have that chemistry.
And here's the thing that really surprised me.
What's that?
Even if Swebb decides that a potential client isn't a good fit for him,
yeah,
he'll actually refer them to other consultants.
Oh, wow.
Who might be a better match.
That's really generous.
It is. It's almost unheard of in the consulting world.
I know, it's like cutthroat out there.
Right. But Swebb doesn't see it that way.
How so?
He genuinely wants to help people.
Even if it means sending them to a competitor.
Even then.
Wow.
He sees it as a way to build relationships and goodwill.
I see
within the industry.
He's playing the long game.
He really is.
Building a reputation for being, like, trustworthy and helpful.
Exactly. And that kind of reputation is invaluable.
It can open doors.
Now, shifting gears a bit.
Okay.
Let's talk about Swebb's pricing structure.
Oh, yeah. This is interesting.
He mentioned he doesn't do annual contracts.
Right, which is pretty unusual.
Very unusual in the consulting world.
Yeah.
And he's actually quite critical of consultants who lock clients into these long-term engagements.
I can see why.
Especially those who charge a hefty fee for minimal contact.
Like they're just phoning it in.
He basically says, I could give you a year's worth of their content in an hour.
Haha. Wow. So what's behind this disdain for long contracts, do you think?
I think it goes back to his focus on delivering immediate value and not creating dependency.
Right. He wants to empower his clients.
Exactly.
Not make them reliant on him.
So how does he actually charge for his services then?
Yeah. How does that work?
He mentioned that it varies based on the client's needs.
Okay. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all approach?
Definitely not.
Yeah.
He figures out what the client needs, how much time and effort it will require on his end.
Right.
And then sets a price accordingly.
So very personalized?
Very. I think he's trying to be as upfront and transparent as possible.
Which is good.
Right. It's like he's saying, I'm not going to charge you a flat fee for something that might take me a week or might take me a month.
Right.
I'm going to be upfront about what it's actually going to cost.
Do you think that's sustainable, though?
That's the question.
Especially as his business grows.
Yeah. It's a balancing act.
It is.
How do you scale your business without sacrificing that personal touch?
That makes you unique.
That's the challenge.
Definitely a challenge. Well, speaking of scaling, let's hear what Swebb has to say about building an audience and attracting the right clients.
Sound good.
In the next part of our deep dive, we'll explore Swebb's somewhat unconventional strategies for building a following.
Right.
We'll also uncover his surprisingly generous approach to referrals.
I'm intrigued.
Stay tuned for the final installment of our deep dive into the mind of Swebb.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into Swebb's coaching call. We've been talking about how he built his business, his pricing, how he picks clients. But what's really interesting to me is how he views building an audience, something we all struggle with.
What I find fascinating is that he doesn't advocate for these super complex marketing strategies or trying to be everything to everyone. It's more about putting out really good content.
Yeah.
Content that reflects your own perspective.
Yeah. Even if it's a little edgy.
Even if it's edgy. He even says be a little polarizing.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The most successful churches he's worked with aren't afraid to take a stand,
Even if it means maybe turning some people off.
Exactly. And he uses himself as an example, right?
Yeah, he's got that big Instagram following.
He's built that following by being honest and direct, even if it rubs some people the wrong way.
It's like he's saying, if you try to be vanilla, you'll get lost in the noise. You got to have a strong flavor.
You got to stand out.
Do you think that applies to every field, though?
That's a great question. Authenticity is key, but there's a balance.
Right.
Think about your field. How can you be genuine while still appealing to a wide enough audience?
It's a challenge for sure.
And Swebb kind of acknowledges this when he talks about defining your niche.
Your niche, yeah.
And your target audience.
It's about focusing, right.
It's about focus. He uses this analogy of building a product,
Yeah.
If you create something truly valuable, the right people will find it.
They'll come to you.
It's not about chasing the audience. It's about letting the audience chase you.
I like that. But what about those difficult clients?
Oh, yeah. Surely even Swebb has to deal with some of those.
I mean, nobody's perfect.
Right.
So how does he handle that?
Well, he talks about how having that clear no list helps.
Oh, right. To weed out the bad fits.
Yeah, right from the start.
So he's avoiding those problems before they even begin.
Exactly.
Smart.
And he's not afraid to fire clients who don't respect his boundaries.
Or who aren't putting in the work.
He actually shares this story about a client who wanted a quick fix.
Oh, no.
Without any effort.
Classic.
And Swebb basically told him, look, I'm not a magician. You got to be willing to do the work.
Good for him. It's a good reminder for all of us.
It is.
We don't have to tolerate bad behavior from clients no matter how much they're paying.
Self-respect is key.
Absolutely. And, this leads to something really interesting.
What's that?
Swebb's approach to referrals.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
He's incredibly generous with them.
Really?
He regularly refers potential clients to other consultants.
If he thinks they're a better fit.
If he thinks they're a better fit, it's unheard of in the consulting world,
I know, it's so competitive out there.
But Swebb doesn't see it as competition.
More like collaboration.
Exactly. He's genuinely happy to help people.
Even if it means sending business to someone else.
Even then. He sees it as building relationships
Yeah.
and goodwill in the industry.
It's like he's thinking long term.
He is. He's building a reputation for being trustworthy and helpful.
And that is invaluable.
So as we wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
I want to leave you with a question inspired by Swebb's approach.
Okay, hit me.
What are your non-negotiables
Non-negotiables.
when it comes to working with clients or collaborators?
What are the things you absolutely will not compromise on?
No matter what.
No matter how much money's on the table.
Exactly.
That's something to think about.
It is. Take some time to reflect.
Yeah, let those ideas percolate.
We'd love to hear your aha moments, any insights you've gained from this episode. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.
Are you going to do something with what you just heard? Or are you just trying to be entertained? Share this episode, then connect with Swebb. Bring him to your headquarters or visit him in Austin, Texas. You, doing all you said you'd do, that's what the church and the world needs.